A shocking onstage confession shatters trust as Jungkook walks out, leaving Jimin and the audience frozen in a moment of devastating truth. The microphone slipped in Jimin's trembling hand, the faint metallic echo slicing through the suffocating silence just seconds after he said it. "I loved you first, Jungkook, before the world ever did." For a heartbeat, the studio lights felt too bright, too hot, like they were burning straight through skin and bone. Then came the silence, thick, unnatural, almost violent in its stillness. Thousands of eyes locked onto the stage, but none dared to move. Even the cameras hesitated, their mechanical whirring suddenly intrusive, like they were witnessing something they shouldn't. Jungkook didn't look at him. He stood frozen, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. The applause sign flickered uselessly above the audience, ignored. Somewhere in the distance, a staff member whispered into a headset, panic threading through their voice, but it sounded muffled, as if submerged underwater. Jimin swallowed, his throat dry, pulse roaring in his ears. He hadn't planned to say it, not like that, not here, not with the world watching. But something in Jungkook's earlier words had snapped inside him. "You always hide behind jokes," Jungkook had said moments ago, smiling for the cameras, but his eyes had been sharp, almost accusing. "Hyung never takes anything seriously." The audience had laughed. Jimin had too, on instinct, on survival, but the laugh tasted bitter like ash. And now here they were. The truth, naked and irreversible. Jungkook finally moved. Not toward Jimin. Away. The sound of his footsteps against the polished stage floor was deafening in the silence. One step, then another, each one slow, deliberate, like he was forcing himself not to run. "Jungkook," Jimin's voice cracked, barely audible. No response. The exit door opened with a harsh creak, the backstage darkness swallowing Jungkook whole before the door slammed shut behind him. The noise shattered the trance. Gasps erupted, murmurs spread like wildfire. The host stood frozen, cue cards trembling in their hands, completely unprepared for the implosion unfolding in real time. Jimin didn't move. He couldn't. His fingers tightened around the microphone, knuckles whitening, as the weight of what he'd done crashed over him in waves. His chest felt hollow, like something vital had been ripped out, leaving only a ringing emptiness behind. He forced a smile, out of habit, out of desperation, but it faltered almost immediately. He began, but the words dissolved before they could take shape. What explanation could possibly exist for something like this? Backstage, the atmosphere was chaos. Staff rushed past each other, voices overlapping, phones ringing, instructions flying in every direction. But in the middle of it all, Jungkook stood alone in a narrow hallway, staring at his reflection in a darkened monitor. His breathing was uneven, shallow. He pressed his palms against the edge of a table, grounding himself, but it didn't help. The words echoed relentlessly in his mind. "I loved you first." A bitter laugh escaped him, hollow and humorless. "Of course you did," he muttered under his breath, his voice laced with something dangerously close to anger. But beneath that anger, something far more fragile stirred, something he had buried long ago. Memories. Late nights in cramped practice rooms, Jimin's quiet encouragement when Jungkook doubted himself, the way Jimin always lingered just a second longer than necessary, like he was afraid to let go. Jungkook squeezed his eyes shut. No, he had chosen to forget those moments, to reinterpret them, to protect himself from something he had never been ready to confront. And now Jimin had dragged it all into the light. On stage, in front of everyone. Footsteps approached from behind, hesitant. "Jungkook," a voice called softly. He didn't turn. "Are you okay?" The question felt almost insulting. "Do I look okay?" Jungkook snapped, his tone sharper than he intended. Silence followed. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair, frustration simmering just beneath the surface. "I just need," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Space, time, answers." He didn't know. Back on stage, Jimin finally lowered the microphone. The show had technically resumed, the host stumbling through the script with forced enthusiasm, but the damage was done. Everyone could feel it, the shift, the fracture that couldn't be undone. Jimin stepped back, his movements mechanical, detached, the lights blurred slightly as his vision wavered. He told himself not to cry. Not here. Not now. But the sting behind his eyes refused to fade. He had spent years perfecting control over his emotions, his expressions, his words. He knew exactly what to say, how to act, how to be everything everyone expected. Except tonight. Tonight he had failed. And the worst part wasn't the public fallout that would inevitably follow, the headlines, the speculation, the endless analysis. It was Jungkook's silence. Not anger. Not confusion. Silence. As if Jimin's confession hadn't just broken something fragile between them, but revealed that it had already been broken long ago. Hours later, the studio emptied. The lights dimmed, the echoes faded. Jimin sat alone in the dressing room, still in his stage outfit, staring at his reflection. His makeup had begun to smudge, subtle but noticeable. He didn't bother fixing it. For once, he didn't care about appearances. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze distant. Why now, he whispered to himself. The question lingered in the quiet room, unanswered. Because deep down he already knew. It wasn't just about what Jungkook had said on stage. It was about everything they had never said. Everything they had avoided. Everything that had quietly grown between them over the years, unspoken but undeniable. And tonight it had finally surfaced. Too late. Jimin closed his eyes, the memory of Jungkook walking away replaying over and over, each time cutting deeper than the last. He had always known this was a risk. That loving someone in silence wasn't safe. But he never imagined it would end like this. Not with distance. Not with silence. Not with a door closing between them, loud enough to echo long after the sound had faded. Outside, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to the quiet devastation unfolding behind closed doors. And somewhere in that same city, Jungkook stood under the cold glow of a streetlight, staring up at the dark sky, his thoughts just as tangled, just as heavy. Neither of them knew what came next. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The door to the dressing room burst open so violently it slammed against the wall, the sharp crack slicing through the heavy silence like a gunshot. Jimin didn't flinch. He already knew who it was. You really couldn't wait, huh? Jungkook's voice came out low, rough, laced with disbelief, and something far more dangerous simmering underneath. Out of all the places, all the times, you chose that stage. Jimin lifted his gaze slowly, meeting Jungkook's reflection in the mirror before turning to face him fully. His eyes were tired, rimmed with red, but there was something steady in them now, a quiet resolve that hadn't been there before. I didn't plan it, Jimin said, his voice softer than Jungkook expected but no less firm. You pushed me. Jungkook let out a short, humorless laugh, packing the room like a caged storm. I pushed you. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. So this is my fault now. I didn't say that. But you meant it. Jungkook stopped abruptly, turning toward him, his eyes sharp. You always do this, Hyung. You say half of what you feel and expect people to understand the rest. Jimin stood up slowly, the chair scraping softly against the floor. And you never listen when I do say it. The air between them tightened, stretched thin like it might snap at any second. Don't twist this, Jungkook snapped, stepping closer. You dropped something like that in front of cameras. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, Jimin answered immediately. The certainty in his voice made Jungkook falter for a fraction of a second. And you still did it, Jungkook demanded, his voice rising despite himself. Jimin hesitated just briefly before nodding. Because I was tired. Tired, Jungkook echoed, incredulous. Tired of pretending, Jimin said, his composure cracking just enough for the truth to seep through. Tired of acting like everything you say doesn't get to me, like I'm just fine with being whatever version of me you're comfortable with. Jungkook's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Neither is what you said out there. Jimin shot back, his voice sharper now. You think I didn't hear it? That little comment about me not taking things seriously. It was a joke. It was. The room fell silent again, but this time it was different, charged, volatile. Jungkook looked away first, exhaling slowly. You're overreacting. Jimin laughed, but there was no humor in it. Am I? He took a step closer, his voice dropping. Then tell me I imagined it. Tell me you don't think I hide behind smiles and jokes, because it's easier than dealing with you pushing me away every time things get real. Jungkook's eyes snapped back to him. I'm not pushing you away. You walked out, Jimin said quietly. The words hit harder than anything else he'd said so far. Jungkook opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For a moment, the anger in his expression wavered, replaced by something uncertain, almost conflicted. I walked out because you blindsided me, he finally said, his voice lower now, less defensive but no less intense. You don't just say something like that and expect me to stand there like it's nothing. I didn't expect that, Jimin admitted. Then what did you expect? Jungkook challenged, stepping closer again. A confession like that, what was I supposed to do? Smile, say thank you. Jimin shook his head. I didn't expect anything back. Then why say it? The question hung between them, heavier than everything else. Jimin looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time there was no hesitation, no filter. Because it's the truth, he said simply. Jungkook's breath caught, almost imperceptibly. And I was done pretending it was. The words landed differently this time. Not like an attack. Not like a mistake. But like something inevitable. Jungkook turned away again, but this time it wasn't out of anger. He walked toward the far wall, pressing his palm against it as if grounding himself, his shoulders rising and falling with a deep breath. You don't get it, he murmured. Then make me understand. Jungkook let out a slow exhale, his voice quieter now, almost strained. You think this is just about you finally saying something? It's not. He turned his head slightly, enough for Jimin to see the tension in his expression. It's about everything that comes after. Jimin frowned slightly. What do you mean? Jungkook laughed again, but this time it sounded more like frustration than bitterness. You really don't see it. He turned fully now, his eyes locking onto Jimin's. You didn't just confess to me, you did it in front of the entire world. The weight of that reality settled heavily in the room. The headlines, the speculation, the questions, this isn't just ours anymore, Jungkook continued, his voice tightening. It's public, it's messy, it's something we can't control. Jimin's expression softened, but he didn't back down. And that scares you? Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't have to. Jimin stepped closer again, slower this time, more careful. You're not angry because I said it, he said quietly. You're angry because now you have to face it. Jungkook's eyes flashed. Don't act like you know what I'm feeling. Then tell me I'm wrong. Silence. Again. But this silence was louder than all the others. Jungkook's gaze dropped for a moment, his hands clenching at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more raw than before. You think I haven't thought about it, he said. Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook looked up again, and this time there was no anger, just something unguarded, something dangerously honest. You think I haven't noticed the way you look at me sometimes, he continued, his voice almost unsteady. Or the way he stopped himself abruptly, shaking his head as if trying to push the words back down. The way you what? Jimin pressed, his heart pounding now. Jungkook hesitated. For the first time that night he looked unsure. And that terrified him more than anything else. The way I can't stop thinking about it after, Jungkook admitted finally, the words slipping out before he could stop them. The air shifted. Something fragile, something undeniable, settled between them. Jimin took a small step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Then why run from it? Jungkook's expression hardened again, but it wasn't the same anger as before, it was fear, raw and unfiltered. Because if I don't, he said, his voice tight, everything changes. Jimin nodded slowly. It already has. That truth lingered, heavy and inescapable. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Jungkook let out a long breath, running a hand over his face. You don't make this easy. Jimin's lips curved faintly, but there was sadness behind it. Neither do you. A quiet tension replaced the earlier chaos, not resolved, not calm, but something more complicated. More real. Jungkook glanced at him again, his gaze softer now though still guarded. I don't know what to do with this. Jimin stepped closer, stopping just within reach. You don't have to figure it out tonight. Jungkook studied him for a moment, searching his face for something, certainty maybe or reassurance. And if I can't figure it out at all, he asked quietly. Jimin's expression didn't waver. Then at least you'll know the truth. Another silence followed, but this one felt different. Less suffocating. More like the quiet before something inevitable. Jungkook looked at him for a long moment, then let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. Everything going to be a mess after this, he said. Jimin nodded, I know. Jungkook hesitated, then added, almost reluctantly, and you're still not taking it back. Jimin shook his head. Not this time. Something unreadable flickered in Jungkook's eyes, fear, frustration, and something else, something that lingered just beneath the surface. Yeah, he murmured softly, I figured. Outside, the noise of the world was already growing louder. Phones buzzing, rumors spreading, the story taking on a life of its own. But inside that room, for the first time since the stage went silent, neither of them walked away. Not yet. The phone vibrated violently against the table, skidding toward the edge before Jimin caught it just in time, his fingers trembling slightly as the screen lit up with a flood of notifications. He didn't need to open them. He already knew. Jungkook watched him from across the room, his expression unreadable, but his jaw tightened as another buzz cut through the thick air. Go on, Jungkook muttered, his voice low, edged with something bitter. Check it, I'm sure we are trending by now. Jimin exhaled slowly, unlocking the screen despite himself. His eyes flickered rapidly as headlines, comments, and clipped videos flooded in, fragments of his confession already dissected, replayed, twisted. He turned the phone slightly, not enough to show Jungkook everything, but enough. Jungkook glanced at it for half a second before looking away again, a sharp scoff escaping him. That fast, he said under his breath. Of course. They're calling it a scandal, Jimin said quietly, his thumb hovering over the screen before locking it again. Speculating everything. Jungkook laughed again, but it sounded more exhausted than amused this time. Everything, he shook his head. They don't even know half of it. The words lingered. Jimin looked up, then tell me the half I don't know. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms, as if putting physical distance between himself and the question. You think this is just about feelings, Jungkook said finally, his tone quieter but heavier. It's not that simple. It never is, Jimin replied. Jungkook's gaze sharpened. No, you don't get it. You've always been able to adapt, smile, move on, pretend things don't hurt as much as they do. He pushed himself off the wall, stepping closer again. I can't do that. Jimin's chest tightened. I never pretended it didn't hurt. You're good at hiding it, Jungkook shot back. There's a difference. The tension surged again, sharper now, more personal. Jimin's voice dropped. And you're good at running. Jungkook stopped mid-step. Something in his expression cracked, just briefly. Don't, Jungkook warned, his voice low. Don't what? Jimin challenged, stepping forward to meet him. Call you out. You don't know everything, Jungkook said, his tone tightening. Then stop shutting me out and tell me. Jungkook's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his breathing uneven. For a moment it looked like he might snap back again, deflect, retreat into anger. But he didn't. Instead he laughed softly, quiet, hollow. You really want to know, he said, his voice suddenly calmer, almost too calm. Jimin held his gaze. Yes. Jungkook nodded slowly, like he was making a decision he couldn't undo. Fine, he said. He turned away briefly, running a hand through his hair before facing Jimin again, his eyes darker now, more vulnerable than before. Do you remember the night after our first big performance overseas? Jungkook asked. Jimin blinked, caught off guard. Of course I do. Jungkook tilted his head slightly. Do you remember what you said to me? Jimin frowned, trying to recall. We were exhausted. You were nervous before going on stage, and I told you you'd be amazing. Jungkook shook his head. Not that part, after, when everyone else had gone to sleep. Jimin hesitated. Fragments of memory surfaced. Dim hotel lights, the hum of the city outside, Jungkook sitting by the window, unusually quiet. I said, Jimin trailed off, his voice faltering as realization crept in. Jungkook watched him carefully. You said you don't have to carry everything alone. The words echoed faintly in the room, carrying more weight now than they had back then. Jimin swallowed. I meant it. I know, Jungkook said softly, that's the problem. Jimin's brows knit together. What do you mean? Jungkook stepped closer again, his voice dropping. You said things like that all the time. You looked at me like. He stopped himself, exhaling sharply. Like I mattered more than just everything else. Jimin's heart pounded. You did matter. Jungkook shook his head, frustration flashing across his face. That's exactly it. You made me feel like that and then acted like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing, Jimin insisted, his voice breaking slightly. Then why didn't you say it? Jungkook demanded, his voice rising again. Why wait until now, until it's too late to keep it between us? Jimin froze. The question cut deeper than anything else. I was scared, Jimin admitted, barely above a whisper. Jungkook let out a sharp breath. You, scared? There was disbelief in his tone, but not mockery, something closer to confusion. You've never looked scared of anything. Jimin laughed quietly, shaking his head. That's because I didn't let you see it. The room seemed to shrink around them. I was scared of losing you, Jimin continued, his voice steadier now, even as his eyes betrayed him. Scared that if I said it, things would change, that you'd pull away. He looked at Jungkook, his gaze unwavering. And I was right. Jungkook flinched, almost imperceptibly. I didn't pull away because of that, Jungkook said quickly, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. Jimin tilted his head slightly. Then why? Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it again, his gaze dropping to the floor. Because I didn't know what to do with it, he admitted finally. Because every time I thought about it, it felt like stepping into something I couldn't control. Jimin stepped closer, his voice softer now. And you hate that? Jungkook nodded once, almost reluctantly. Yeah. A quiet understanding settled between them, fragile but real. But you still felt it, Jimin said. Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said enough. Jimin took another step forward, closing the distance between them until they were only inches apart. Then why pretend you did? Jungkook's eyes lifted to meet his, something conflicted burning in them. Because pretending was easier than risking everything. And now, Jungkook let out a slow breath, his gaze flickering briefly to Jimin's lips before snapping back to his eyes. Now you've made sure there's no pretending left. Jimin didn't back away. Good. That single word landed like a spark. Jungkook's expression shifted, surprise, then something sharper, something more dangerous. You really don't regret it, he said quietly. Jimin shook his head. Not anymore. For a moment the tension between them shifted again, not explosive this time but charged, electric. Jungkook stepped even closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You're unbelievable. Jimin's lips curved faintly. You've always known that. Jungkook huffed out a quiet breath, shaking his head, but he didn't move away. You realize this changes everything, right? He said. Jimin nodded. It already has. Jungkook studied him for a long moment, searching for hesitation, doubt. He found none. Something in his expression softened, just slightly. Then don't expect me to handle it perfectly, Jungkook said. I don't, Jimin replied. Another beat of silence. Then Jungkook's phone rang, sharp and intrusive, breaking the moment. He glanced at the screen, his expression immediately tightening. Management, he said. Jimin's stomach dropped slightly. They've seen it. Of course they have. Jungkook let it ring for a moment longer before answering, turning slightly away but not leaving the room. Yes, he said, his tone shifting instantly into something more controlled. I know. A pause. Jimin watched him closely, trying to read the subtle changes in his expression. No, I'm still here, Jungkook continued, with him. Another pause. His jaw tightened. I'm not going to say anything yet, he said more firmly now. Not until we talk. Jimin's chest tightened at that. Wait. The call ended abruptly. Jungkook lowered the phone slowly, exhaling. Well, Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook looked at him, something serious settling into his expression. They want a statement. Jimin nodded, unsurprised. They want to control the narrative, Jungkook added, his tone edged with frustration. Say it was a misunderstanding, a joke taken out of context. Jimin's expression hardened slightly. It wasn't a joke. I know. The words came without hesitation. Jimin blinked, caught off guard by the certainty in Jungkook's voice. And I'm not going to lie about it, Jungkook continued, his gaze steady. Jimin's breath caught. You're not. Jungkook shook his head slowly. No. A wave of something unfamiliar, relief, disbelief, something warmer, spread through Jimin's chest. That doesn't mean I know what this is yet, Jungkook added quickly, his tone more cautious now. Or what we're supposed to do. Jimin nodded. We'll figure it out. Jungkook studied him again, then let out a quiet breath. Yeah. Outside, the world was still spiraling, louder than ever. But inside the room, something had shifted. Not fixed. Not resolved. But no longer avoided. And for the first time that felt like enough, the knock on the door was sharp, urgent, and didn't wait for permission before it swung open. 3 managers stepped in at once, their expressions tight, controlled, but barely masking the panic underneath. The air shifted immediately, the fragile space Jimin and Jungkook had just created collapsing under the weight of authority and expectation. We need to talk, now, the lead manager said, his voice low but firm. Jungkook didn't move. We are talking. This isn't the time for that, another cut in, glancing briefly at Jimin before focusing back on Jungkook. This situation is escalating faster than expected. Jimin let out a quiet breath, crossing his arms loosely as he leaned against the edge of the table. It's not a situation, he said calmly. It's the truth. The room stilled. The lead manager's jaw tightened. With all due respect, this is exactly the kind of statement that will make things worse. Jungkook glanced sideways at Jimin, then back at them. Worse than what? It's already everywhere. That doesn't mean we let it spiral, the manager replied sharply. We control it before it controls you. Jimin laughed softly under his breath. Control it, he repeated almost to himself. Jungkook noticed, his gaze flickering back to Jimin. Say what you want to say. Jimin looked up, meeting his eyes for a moment before turning to the managers. You want us to lie. It's not lying, one of them insisted quickly. It's reframing, clarifying. You say it was taken out of context, emotions were high. It wasn't out of context, Jimin interrupted, his voice still calm but cutting through the room like glass. I said exactly what I meant. Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. The managers exchanged glances. Jimin, the lead one said more carefully now, stepping forward slightly. You have to understand the implications here. This doesn't just affect you. It affects the group, the brand, everything you've built. Jimin's expression didn't change. I know exactly what it affects. Then act like it, the manager pressed, because right now this looks reckless. Jungkook shifted at that, his posture tightening. He's not being reckless. All eyes turned to him. The manager blinked. Jungkook. I said he's not, Jungkook repeated, his tone sharper now. He told the truth. And the truth needs to be handled carefully, the manager shot back, not broadcasted live without warning. Jungkook stepped forward, placing himself slightly between them and Jimin without even realizing it. So what's your plan? Pretend it didn't happen. Yes, one of them said bluntly, at least publicly. The word hung in the air like a threat. Jimin pushed himself off the table, stepping forward until he stood beside Jungkook, not behind him. I'm not doing that, Jimin said. The room seemed to shrink. You don't have a choice, the manager replied, his tone hardening now. There are contracts involved, obligations. You can't just decide something like this on your own. Jimin tilted his head slightly, his gaze steady. Watch me. The tension snapped. Jungkook's eyes widened slightly, not at the defiance, but at how calm Jimin sounded saying it. Don't make this bigger than it already is, the manager warned. We can still contain this if you cooperate. Jungkook let out a sharp breath. Contain it, he echoed. You mean erase it? We mean protect you, the manager corrected quickly. Jungkook laughed, but there was no humor in it, by pretending it never happened. Yes. No, Jungkook said immediately. The answer came so fast it surprised even Jimin. The room fell silent again. The managers stared at him, stunned. Jungkook, think carefully about what you're saying. I am, Jungkook replied, his voice steady now, grounded in something new, something resolved. And I'm not going to stand there and act like he didn't mean it. Jimin looked at him, something flickering in his eyes, something softer, something dangerously close to hope. And what exactly are you going to do instead? The manager demanded. Jungkook hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough for doubt to creep in. Jimin noticed. He stepped in before the silence could swallow Jungkook whole. We don't need to have all the answers right now. That's not how this works, the manager snapped. The public won't wait. Then let them wait, Jimin said, his tone firm. You're being naive. And you're being controlling, Jimin shot back, the calm finally cracking just enough to reveal the fire underneath. Jungkook glanced between them, tension tightening in his chest again. Stop, he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the rising conflict. Everyone froze. Jungkook ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. This isn't helping. No, it isn't, the manager agreed quickly, which is why we need to move fast and… I said stop, Jungkook repeated louder this time. Silence. Jungkook looked at them, his gaze sharper now. You're asking us to act like this didn't mean anything. That's not what we're asking, the manager insisted. It is, Jungkook said. You're asking him to take back something he meant, something he stopped himself, his voice catching slightly. Jimin's breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. Jungkook clenched his jaw, pushing through it. Something that matters. The room shifted again. The managers exchanged another look, more cautious this time. So what? One of them asked carefully. You're going to confirm it publicly? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. The weight of that question pressed down on him, heavy, suffocating. Jimin watched him, not saying a word this time. Waiting. Jungkook looked at him, really looked at him, and something in his expression changed. The hesitation didn't disappear. But it steadied. I'm not going to deny it, Jungkook said finally. The words landed like a shockwave. Jimin's heart pounded. The managers looked like they'd just been hit. That's not enough, one of them said quickly. If you don't deny it, people will assume. Let them, Jungkook cut in. You're not thinking clearly. No, Jungkook said, his voice quieter now but more certain. For the first time I am. The lead manager stepped forward again, his patience thinning. Jungkook, this isn't just about feelings, this is about your career. And my life is, Jungkook shot back. The question hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. No one answered. Jimin stepped closer, his voice softer now but no less firm. We've spent years doing everything right, saying the right things, acting the right way. He glanced at Jungkook briefly before looking back at the managers. Maybe it's time we stop pretending that's enough. The room felt impossibly still. You're risking everything, the manager said. Jimin nodded, I know. And you're okay with that? Jimin didn't hesitate. Yes. All eyes turned to Jungkook again. The final decision. The final line. Jungkook felt it, the pressure, the fear, the uncertainty clawing at him from all sides. But beneath all of that, there was something else now. Something steady. He looked at Jimin one more time. And for once he didn't look away. I'm not going to lie, Jungkook said. The silence that followed was absolute. Not explosive. Not chaotic. Just final. The managers didn't argue again. Maybe because they realized it was pointless. Maybe because something in Jungkook's voice made it clear there was no changing his mind. Then be ready for what comes next, the lead manager said quietly. Jungkook nodded once. We will. The door closed behind them, leaving the room eerily quiet again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jimin let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That was intense. Jungkook huffed out a small laugh, running a hand through his hair. That's one way to put it. Jimin looked at him, his expression softer now. You didn't have to do that. I know. Then why did you? Jungkook hesitated, then shrugged lightly, though his voice betrayed him. Because you meant it. Jimin's chest tightened, and that's enough. Jungkook met his gaze, something honest and unguarded flickering there again. It's a start. The words weren't perfect. They weren't a confession. But they weren't a denial either. And somehow that made them more real. Jimin stepped closer, his voice quieter now. We're really doing this. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Yeah. Even if everything changes. Jungkook nodded. Even then. A quiet settled between them again, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with possibility. And for the first time since the stage went silent, neither of them seemed afraid of what came next. The first crack came from outside. A shout echoed down the hallway, sharp, chaotic, unmistakably panicked, followed by the rapid pounding of footsteps and the shrill ringing of multiple phones at once. The noise seeped through the walls like a rising storm, growing louder by the second. Jungkook's head turned toward the door instantly. What now? Before either of them could move, the door swung open again, this time harder, faster, slamming against the wall with enough force to rattle the mirror. A staff member stood there, breathless, eyes wide. You need to see this, now. Jimin frowned slightly, tension tightening in his chest again. What happened? The staff member didn't answer, just held up a tablet with shaking hands. Jungkook stepped forward first, grabbing it. The screen was already playing a video. Not the stage. Not the confession. Something else. The footage was grainy, clearly taken from a distance but unmistakable. A dimly lit practice room, two figures familiar. Jimin's breath caught. No, he whispered. Jungkook's grip on the tablet tightened. It was them. Months ago. Jimin standing too close. Jungkook sitting on the floor looking up at him, something vulnerable in his expression that had never been meant for anyone else to see. The audio was faint at first, muffled by distance. Then it sharpened. Why do you always look at me like that? Jungkook's voice in the video, soft, uncertain. A pause. Then Jimin's voice. Because I don't know how not to. The room around them seemed to collapse inward. Jungkook froze. Jimin couldn't move. The video continued. Jungkook in the past letting out a nervous laugh, looking away. You're joking again. I'm not, Jimin said in the recording, his tone quieter, more fragile than either of them remembered. The clip ended abruptly. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Jungkook lowered the tablet slowly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were darker now, something stormy building behind them. How, he started, his voice low, dangerous. How does this even exist? The staff member swallowed. It's already spreading. Someone leaked it anonymously. It's tied to tonight's broadcast. People are connecting everything. Jimin ran a hand over his face, his thoughts racing. That room was private, he said, his voice tight. There weren't supposed to be any cameras. There weren't, the staff member said, not officially. The implication hung in the air like a threat. Jungkook let out a sharp breath, packing now, his movements restless, agitated. So someone's been recording us without permission. Or someone inside leaked it, the staff member added quietly. That hit differently. Jimin's stomach dropped. Inside, he repeated under his breath. Jungkook stopped packing. The anger that had been simmering all night surged again, but this time it had direction. Who has access to old practice footage? He demanded. The staff member hesitated. Management, production teams, security archives. Jungkook let out a bitter laugh. So basically everyone. Jimin looked at the frozen screen again. his own past self staring back at him like a ghost he couldn't escape. That wasn't supposed to mean anything to anyone else, he murmured. Jungkook turned toward him sharply. It meant something to me. The words landed harder than intended. Jimin looked up, startled. Jungkook's expression shifted slightly, as if he realized what he'd just admitted, but he didn't take it back. That moment, Jungkook continued, his voice quieter now but still tense. I thought I imagined it. I thought you were just being you. I was being me, Jimin said softly. Exactly, Jungkook shot back, frustration flashing again, and I didn't know what that meant. Jimin stepped closer, his voice steady despite the storm around them. It meant I cared. Jungkook exhaled sharply. Yeah, I get that now. The staff member shifted awkwardly. This is getting out of control. The video's already everywhere. People are dissecting every frame, every word. I know, Jungkook snapped, running a hand through his hair. Jimin's gaze hardened slightly. Then we stop letting them control the story. Jungkook looked at him. And how do you plan to do that? Jimin didn't hesitate. We tell it ourselves. The staff member blinked. You mean release a statement? Jimin shook his head slowly. Not just a statement. Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly. What are you thinking? Jimin held his gaze. We go live. The room went completely still. The staff member looked like they'd just heard something impossible. That's a terrible idea. Or it's the only honest one, Jimin replied. Jungkook stared at him, searching his face for doubt, hesitation. He found none. You want to face everything head-on, Jungkook said. Yes. Right now. Yes. Jungkook let out a slow breath, the weight of it pressing down on him again. This isn't just about us anymore, he said. It never was, Jimin replied quietly, but that doesn't mean we let other people decide what it is. The silence stretched. Then Jungkook laughed softly, shaking his head. You really don't make things easy. Jimin's lips curved faintly. You've said that before. Jungkook looked at him for a long moment, then glanced back at the tablet, at the frozen image of their past selves caught in a moment neither of them had fully understood back then. Going live means no filters, Jungkook said, no taking anything back. Jimin nodded, I know. And if we say the wrong thing? We won't, Jimin interrupted gently. Jungkook's gaze flickered back to him. You sound very sure. I'm not, Jimin admitted, but I'm sure about one thing. What? Jimin took a breath. I don't want to hide anymore. The words settled into the space between them, heavy but grounding. Jungkook studied him again, something shifting in his expression. Fear, yes, but also something stronger. Resolve. Then we don't hide, Jungkook said. The staff member looked between them, completely overwhelmed. You're serious? Neither of them answered. They didn't need to. Minutes later, the room transformed into controlled chaos. Cameras were set up hastily, lighting adjusted, phones positioned. Staff whispered urgently, some arguing under their breath, others watching with a mix of concern and disbelief. Jimin stood in front of the camera, his posture straight, his expression calm but not distant. Jungkook stood beside him, quieter, more tense but present. Reeled. Are you ready? Someone asked. Jungkook glanced at Jimin. Jimin met his gaze. A silent question. A silent answer. Jungkook nodded once. The camera light turned on. They were live. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The comments were already flooding in, scrolling faster than anyone could read. Jimin took a breath. Hi, he began, his voice steady despite everything. I know a lot of you have seen what happened tonight. Jungkook glanced at the screen briefly, then back at the camera. And the video, he added, his tone quieter but firm. The one from before. Jimin nodded. We are not here to deny it. A ripple of shock moved through the unseen audience. Jungkook's jaw tightened slightly, but he continued. What you saw wasn't fake, it wasn't scripted. Jimin's voice softened. It was real. The words hung there, raw and undeniable. Jungkook took a breath, his gaze steady now. But what it means isn't something anyone else gets to decide. Jimin looked at him briefly, then back at the camera. We're still figuring that out ourselves. The honesty in that statement cut through the noise like nothing else. No denials. No clean answers. Just truth. Messy, complicated, unfinished. Jungkook exhaled slowly. We didn't plan for any of this to happen the way it did. Jimin gave a small, almost rueful smile, not even close. A faint, unexpected softness crept into Jungkook's expression at that. But we're not going to run from it either, Jungkook said. Jimin nodded. Whatever this is, we'll face it. Together. The word wasn't spoken. But it was there. Clear as anything else they had said. The comments kept flooding in, faster, louder, more intense. But for the first time that night, neither of them looked overwhelmed. They looked steady. Not because things were okay, but because they had stopped pretending they were. The live broadcast ended, but the silence that followed was louder than anything that had come before. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The red recording light blinked off, and suddenly the room felt colder, emptier, like the weight of everything they had just done was finally allowed to settle. Then the noise returned all at once. Phones exploded with notifications again. Staff started talking over each other. Someone cursed under their breath. Another voice demanded immediate damage control. The storm hadn't calmed, it had intensified. Jungkook stepped back first, dragging a hand down his face, his breathing uneven. That was, he trailed off, shaking his head. Honest, Jimin finished quietly. Jungkook let out a dry laugh. Yeah, honest. He looked at him, something conflicted flickering in his eyes, and terrifying. Jimin didn't disagree. Before either of them could say anything else, the door slammed open again. This time it wasn't just management. It was him. The CEO stepped inside slowly, the room falling into immediate, suffocating silence as every staff member straightened instinctively. His presence alone shifted the air, heavy with authority and something colder, something calculating. Jungkook's posture stiffened. Jimin didn't move. I watched the entire broadcast, the CEO said, his voice calm, too calm. No one responded. His gaze moved between them, assessing, measuring. Do either of you understand what you've just done? He asked. Jungkook inhaled slowly, steadying himself. Yes. Then explain it to me, the CEO replied, his tone sharpening slightly. Jungkook hesitated. Jimin didn't. We told the truth, Jimin said simply. A flicker of something unreadable passed through the CEO's expression. The truth, he repeated, and you believe that justifies the consequences. Jimin held his gaze. I believe it was necessary. A faint, humorless smile touched the CEO's lips. Necessary. He took a few steps closer, the sound of his shoes against the floor echoing in the tense quiet. You've just destabilized years of carefully built reputation in less than an hour. Jungkook's jaw tightened. We didn't create the situation. No, the CEO agreed, but you chose how to respond to it. And we chose not to lie, Jungkook said. The CEO stopped in front of them, his gaze sharp. You chose to make it worse. The words hit harder than expected. Jimin stepped forward slightly, or we chose not to make it fake. The CEO's eyes shifted to him. Do you think the public wants real? He asked quietly. They want clarity, simplicity, something they can understand and move on from. Jimin didn't look away. Then they'll have to deal with something more complicated. A tense silence followed. Jungkook felt it, the line they were crossing, the point of no return stretching out beneath their feet. You're playing a dangerous game, the CEO said. Jungkook exhaled slowly. We didn't ask for this. But you embraced it, the CEO replied immediately. Jimin's voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. We stopped running from it. The CEO studied them both for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed. Not in frustration. In calculation. Do you know what's trending right now? He asked. Neither of them answered. He continued anyway. Half the world is praising your honesty, he said. The other half is tearing you apart, speculating, twisting, creating narratives you won't be able to control. Jungkook let out a quiet breath. We knew that would happen. Did you? The CEO challenged. Because this isn't just about you anymore. This affects everyone connected to you. Jimin's expression tightened slightly. We're not trying to hurt anyone. Intent doesn't matter, the CEO said sharply. Impact does. The room fell silent again. Jungkook felt something stir in his chest, guilt, sharp and unwelcome. Jimin noticed. You're not wrong, Jimin admitted quietly, but neither are we. The CEO's gaze lingered on him. That remains to be seen. Before anyone could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Hyung, what the hell is going on? The words were breathless, confused, and laced with disbelief. Jungkook turned instantly. The rest of the group stood in the doorway. Their expressions ranged from shock to concern to something harder to read. They had seen everything. Jimin's chest tightened. Since when? One of them asked, stepping forward slightly, his eyes flicking between Jimin and Jungkook. Since when has this been happening? Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it again. Jimin stepped in, his voice steady despite the pressure. It's not something that happened suddenly. That's not an answer, another voice said, sharper now. It's the only one I have, Jimin replied. Silence. The tension shifted again, more personal now, more fragile. You should have told us, someone said quietly. Jungkook flinched slightly at that. Jimin's expression softened. I know. Did you think we wouldn't understand? The same voice pressed. Jimin hesitated. That's not it, Jungkook said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. Jungkook exhaled slowly, his voice quieter now. We didn't understand it ourselves. The honesty in that statement cut through the tension in a way nothing else had. The room stilled. For a moment no one argued. No one pushed. They just absorbed it. Jimin glanced at Jungkook, something unspoken passing between them. Then another voice spoke, softer this time. So what now? That question lingered, heavy and uncertain. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin looked back. For once, neither of them had an immediate answer. I don't know, Jungkook admitted. Jimin nodded, but we're not pretending it didn't happen. A long silence followed. Then slowly one of them let out a breath. Yeah, that much is obvious. There was no anger in it this time. Just acceptance. Complicated, incomplete, but real. The CEO stepped back slightly, watching the exchange carefully. This is far from over, he said finally. Jungkook met his gaze. We know. Then be prepared, the CEO added, because the next few days will define everything that comes after. Jimin's chest tightened slightly. But he didn't look away. We'll face it, he said. The CEO studied him for a moment longer, then nodded once, slow, deliberate. Make sure you're ready for what that actually means. He turned and walked out, the room parting for him instinctively. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. And just like that, the pressure shifted again. Not gone, but changed. The group remained, the tension no longer sharp but heavy with unspoken questions. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling slowly. This is a lot. That's an understatement, someone muttered. A faint, almost nervous laugh rippled through the room, breaking the tension just enough to let everyone breathe again. Jimin glanced around, his voice softer now. We didn't want you to find out like this. Yeah, well, one of them replied, running a hand through his hair. You really know how to make an announcement. Jungkook huffed out a quiet laugh despite himself. The atmosphere shifted again, still tense, still uncertain, but no longer suffocating. Not entirely. Jimin looked at Jungkook again, his voice quieter now, meant only for him. Do you regret it? He asked. Jungkook stilled. The question hung between them, fragile, dangerous. For a moment, everything else faded, the noise, the people, the consequences waiting outside those walls. Just them. Jungkook met his gaze. And for the first time that night, there was no hesitation. No, he said. The word was simple, but it carried everything. Jimin's breath caught slightly, something in his chest loosening just enough to let him breathe again. Outside, the world was still unraveling. Inside, nothing was solved. Nothing was easy. But for the first time, it felt like they were standing on the same side of it. And somehow, that made the chaos feel just a little less overwhelming. The building didn't feel safe anymore. That was the first thought that settled in Jungkook's chest as the hallway outside filled with unfamiliar voices, louder than before, sharper, more aggressive. Not staff, not security. Press. How did they even get in? Someone whispered. They didn't, another answered quickly. They're outside, but they're not leaving. Jungkook moved toward the window instinctively, pushing the curtain aside just enough to look down. Flashes of light exploded immediately, camera bursts firing like a storm. A crowd had gathered, larger than anything he'd ever seen this close to the building. Microphones raised, phones recording, voices shouting questions that blurred into a chaotic roar. Jungkook, is it true? Jimin, say something. Are you together? Was it real or staged? The noise clawed its way up the walls, pressing in. Jungkook let the curtain fall back into place, his jaw tightening. They're not going anywhere. Jimin stepped closer, his expression calm but his fingers betraying him, subtly trembling at his side. We knew this would happen. Knowing it and seeing it are different things, Jungkook muttered. Behind them, the others shifted uneasily, the weight of the situation settling deeper. This is insane, one of them said under his breath. It's only been hours. Hours is enough, Jungkook replied quietly. Another voice cut in, more serious. Security says they're blocking the main exit. They're asking if you want to leave through the underground garage. Jungkook exhaled sharply. Of course they are. Jimin glanced at him. We should go. Jungkook nodded but didn't move immediately. Something felt off. Not just the crowd. Something else. Wait, he said suddenly. Everyone paused. What? Jimin asked. Jungkook frowned slightly, his instincts tightening like a pulled thread. That video, the one that got leaked, his eyes narrowed. It wasn't random. Jimin's expression shifted. You think someone planned it? Jungkook turned to him fully now. It surfaced right after your confession, too perfect, too timed. Silence fell. The implications sank in slowly, heavily. You're saying someone wanted this to blow up, one of them said. Jungkook nodded once. Yeah. Jimin's chest tightened. But why? No one answered immediately. Then a quiet voice spoke from the back. Control. They all turned. Scandals like this, the voice continued carefully. They create leverage, attention, power over narratives. Jungkook's jaw clenched. You think this is about manipulation? I think someone knew exactly what they were doing, came the reply. The room felt colder. Jimin looked down briefly, his thoughts racing. Then we're not just dealing with public reaction. Jungkook met his gaze. We're dealing with someone pulling strings. Before they could dig deeper, another knock came, faster, more urgent this time. Security's ready, a staff member called from outside. We need to move now before the crowd gets worse. Jungkook hesitated for only a second before nodding. Let's go. The hallway was different now. Tighter. Heavier. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the building itself was holding its breath. Jimin walked beside Jungkook, close enough that their shoulders brushed occasionally, neither of them pulling away. You okay? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook let out a small breath. Ask me that again in a week. Jimin huffed softly, a faint, fleeting smile breaking through the tension. Fair. They reached the service elevator, the doors sliding open with a mechanical hum that felt almost too loud. As they stepped inside, the outside noise faded slightly, but not completely. Not enough. Jungkook leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes briefly. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Jimin didn't sugarcoat it. Yeah. The elevator descended in silence, floor by floor, each second stretching longer than the last. When the doors opened again, the underground garage greeted them with dim lighting and the low hum of idling engines. Security was already waiting, forming a tight perimeter. "Stay close," one of them instructed. Jungkook nodded, instinctively glancing at Jimin again. They moved quickly. But even down here, the chaos had found its way in. A few cameras, a few voices, not as many as above, but enough to shatter any illusion of privacy. "There they are." The shout came from the far end of the garage. Jungkook's head snapped up. Mori flashes. Mori voices. How did they? Jimin started, but the answer didn't matter. They had been found. Security tightened around them, pushing forward. "Just keep moving," someone urged. But the voices got louder. "Closer. Jungkook, look here. Jimin, is it true? Say something." A microphone was suddenly shoved forward, too close, too invasive. "Did you confess because you were forced?" "Back off," Jungkook snapped, his voice cutting through the noise with sharp intensity. Everything stilled for half a second. Then chaos surged again. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's wrist instinctively, grounding him. "Don't," he murmured. Jungkook's breathing was uneven, his frustration boiling dangerously close to the surface. "They're not even listening." "They're not here to listen," Jimin said softly. "They're here to react." The words hit hard. Jungkook clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay still as security pushed them forward again. The car was only a few steps away now. But the crowd surged one last time. A voice louder than the others cut through everything. Was it always one-sided, Jimin? The question froze him. Jimin stopped. Jungkook turned instantly. "Don't." But it was too late. Jimin looked toward the voice, his expression unreadable. The cameras caught everything. "Answer it," the same voice pressed. Did he ever feel the same way? The world seemed to narrow to that single moment. Jungkook felt something snap inside him. "That's enough," he said, his voice low, dangerous. But Jimin stepped forward. "Just one step." "Enough." "Yes," Jimin said. The word was quiet, but it cut through everything. The noise dropped. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Jungkook's breath caught. "What?" the reporter pushed, stunned. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying it was never one-sided," Jimin continued, his voice steadier now. "That's all you need to know." The silence that followed was explosive. Then everything erupted at once. Shouts, questions, chaos. But Jungkook didn't hear any of it. He was staring at Jimin. "You didn't have to say that," Jungkook said, his voice barely audible over the noise. Jimin turned to him, his expression softer now but unwavering. "I know." "Then why?" "Because it's true," Jimin interrupted gently. Jungkook's chest tightened. Something complicated twisted inside him. Fear, relief, something dangerously close to something he still didn't fully understand. Security pushed them into the car before the moment could stretch any further. The door slammed shut. And just like that, the noise was cut off. Silence filled the space again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was heavier, more personal. Jungkook leaned back against the seat, running a hand through his hair, his breathing still uneven. "You really don't hold back, do you?" Jimin let out a quiet breath. "Not anymore." Jungkook glanced at him, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You just told the entire world it wasn't one-sided." Jimin met his gaze. "Was I wrong?" Jungkook didn't answer. He couldn't. Not right away. The car started moving, the city lights blurring past the window. Time stretched. Then, "No," Jungkook said quietly. The word hung in the air. Jimin's breath hitched slightly. Jungkook looked away, his voice lower now, almost lost in the hum of the car. "You weren't wrong." The weight of that settled between them, deeper than anything they had said before. Jimin didn't push. Didn't ask for more. Because this was already everything. Outside, the storm was still raging. But inside the car, something had shifted again. Not resolved. Not defined. But undeniable. And this time there was no taking it back. The car didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a pressure chamber. The city blurred past the windows, streaks of neon and shadow melting together, but inside, the silence pressed harder than the chaos they had just left behind. Jungkook's hands were still clenched. Jimin noticed. "You're shaking," Jimin said quietly. "I'm not," Jungkook replied too quickly. Jimin didn't argue. He just watched him for a moment longer before looking away, letting the silence settle again instead of forcing it open. The engine hummed steadily beneath them, but Jungkook's thoughts were anything but steady. "That question," Jungkook said suddenly, his voice low, "back there." Jimin turned his head slightly, the one about it being one-sided. Jungkook nodded, staring straight ahead. "You didn't even hesitate." Jimin's lips pressed together faintly. "I already hesitated for years." Jungkook let out a slow breath, something tight unraveling just slightly. "You really don't care what happens next." "I do," Jimin corrected softly. "I just care more about not lying anymore." Jungkook glanced at him then, something sharp flickering in his eyes. "Even if the truth makes everything worse." Jimin held his gaze. "Does it?" Jungkook didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Because part of him felt like everything was already worse, and another part felt like something had finally stopped suffocating. The car slowed. Jungkook frowned slightly. "We're not at the dorm yet." The driver didn't answer. Jimin's eyes narrowed, something uneasy settling in his chest. "Where are we going?" A pause. Then the driver spoke, voice tight. "We were redirected." Jungkook's head snapped forward. "Redirected by who?" No answer. The car took a sharp turn. Jimin's instincts flared instantly. "Stop the car." Silence. "Stop the car," Jimin repeated, louder this time. The driver hesitated. "Too long." Jungkook leaned forward, his voice cold now. "I said stop." The car slowed but didn't fully stop. That was enough. Jungkook's hand shot forward, gripping the back of the driver's seat. "Stop, now." This time the car jerked to a halt. The sudden stillness was jarring. Jimin's heart was pounding now, adrenaline cutting through the earlier emotional haze. "Who told you to change the route?" The driver swallowed. I got a call from management." Jungkook's eyes hardened. "Which manager?" "I don't know," the driver said quickly. It was authorized." "That's not an answer," Jungkook snapped. Jimin leaned forward slightly, his voice quieter but sharper. "Let me see your phone." The driver hesitated again. Jungkook's patience snapped. "Now." The phone was handed over with shaking hands. Jimin scanned the recent calls, his expression tightening almost immediately. "This number," he murmured. Jungkook leaned closer. "What is it?" Jimin turned the screen toward him. "Unknown. No contact name. No identifier. Just a number." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "That's not management." "No," Jimin said quietly, "it's not." A heavy silence filled the car. Jungkook leaned back slowly, his mind racing. "So someone intercepted us." Jimin's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. "Or someone wants us to think they did." Jungkook's eyes flickered to him. "You think this is connected to the leak?" "I think nothing about tonight is random anymore," Jimin replied. The weight of that settled deep. Jungkook looked out the window, scanning their surroundings. Dim street. Less traffic. Too quiet. "We're not going back to the dorm," Jungkook said suddenly. Jimin turned to him. "What?" "If someone's watching us, that's the first place they'll expect," Jungkook explained, his voice steady despite the tension building again. "We need somewhere else." Jimin studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay. The driver shifted nervously. Then where? Jungkook hesitated. Then, my place, Jimin said. Jungkook looked at him. You haven't been there in a while, Jimin added quietly. No one will expect it. Jungkook held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once. Fine. The car started moving again, this time with a clear direction. But the tension didn't ease. If anything, it sharpened. Minutes passed in silence. Until Jungkook spoke again. You knew, he said. Jimin frowned slightly. Knew what? That someone might be watching, Jungkook clarified. You didn't look surprised back there. Jimin hesitated. That was answer enough. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. Jimin. Jimin exhaled slowly, looking down at the phone still in his hand. I didn't know for sure. But you suspected. Jimin nodded faintly. Jungkook let out a sharp breath. Frustration flaring again. And you didn't tell me. I wasn't sure, Jimin said, and I didn't want to make you paranoid over something I couldn't prove. Jungkook laughed bitterly. Too late for that now. Jimin looked at him, something apologetic flickering in his expression. I was trying to protect you. By keeping me in the dark, Jungkook shot back. Jimin's voice softened, but it didn't back down. By not dragging you into something messy before I understood it myself. Jungkook's jaw tightened. We're already in it. I know. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Jungkook looked away again, his voice quieter now. You don't get to decide what I can handle. Jimin flinched slightly. I wasn't trying to, he said. But you did, Jungkook replied. The words lingered. Jimin's fingers tightened around the phone before he set it down between them. You're right, he admitted quietly. Jungkook didn't respond. But the tension between them shifted, less explosive, more raw. Honest. I should have told you, Jimin added. Jungkook exhaled slowly, some of the edge in his posture easing just slightly. Yeah. Another pause. Then, are you scared? Jimin asked softly. Jungkook let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. That's a stupid question. Jimin's lips curved faintly. I'll take that as a yes. Jungkook glanced at him, something softer flickering beneath the tension. You're not. Jimin thought about it. The leak. The crowd. The unknown number. The way everything had spiraled out of control. Then he shook his head. I am, he said, just not of the same things. Jungkook studied him. What are you scared of then? Jimin hesitated. Then answered honestly. That you'll change your mind. The words landed quietly. But they hit harder than everything else. Jungkook stilled. The noise of the car faded into the background. You think I would? He asked, his voice lower now. Jimin met his gaze, steady but vulnerable. I think you're still figuring things out. That doesn't mean I'll run. You've run before. Jungkook flinched. The truth strung. Yeah, he admitted, I did. Jimin didn't push further. He didn't need to. Jungkook leaned back again, staring at the ceiling for a moment before closing his eyes briefly. I'm still scared, he said quietly, of what this means, of what happens next. Jimin nodded, me too. Jungkook turned his head slightly, looking at him again, but I'm more scared of pretending none of this exists. Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook's voice dropped even lower. So no, he said, I'm not changing my mind. The words settled deep. Jimin didn't speak. He couldn't. Because for the first time that night, something inside him finally stopped bracing for impact. The car slowed again. This is it, the driver said. Jimin glanced out the window. His place. Quiet. Hidden. For now. The car stopped completely. Jungkook reached for the door handle, then paused, glancing at Jimin one last time. You sure about this? He asked. Jimin nodded. Yes. Jungkook opened the door. Cool night air rushed in. Uncertain, heavy, but real. And this time, neither of them hesitated before stepping into it. The door hadn't even fully closed behind them when the lights flickered. Jungkook froze mid-step, his instincts snapping tight. Did you leave something on? Jimin was already scanning the room, his breath shallow. No. The apartment was supposed to feel like a safe place, minimalist, quiet, tucked away from everything, but now it felt wrong. Too still, too staged. Then, a faint sound. Not from inside. From the hallway. Jungkook's hand shot out, grabbing Jimin's wrist, pulling him back from the entrance. Don't move. Jimin didn't argue. They both listened. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Then silence. Jungkook's grip tightened slightly. Someone followed us. Jimin's heart started pounding, adrenaline replacing exhaustion. You're sure? Jungkook didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the door, every muscle in his body coiled. Then, a shadow shifted under the gap of the door. Jimin's breath caught. Someone was standing right outside. A soft knock followed. Too calm. Too deliberate. Jungkook's jaw clenched. Don't open it. The knock came again, louder this time. Jimin, a voice called from the other side. Both of them froze. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. That voice. I know, Jungkook said quietly, tension sharpening his tone, but that doesn't mean it's safe. The voice came again, this time firmer. It's me, open the door. Jimin hesitated. Because it did sound familiar. Too familiar. Jungkook noticed the shift instantly. You're thinking about opening it. Jimin swallowed. What if it really is? Or what if someone wants you to think that? Jungkook cut in. The silence stretched. Another knock. Harder now. Jimin, we don't have time for this. Open the door. Jimin exhaled slowly, conflict flashing across his face. Stay behind me. Jungkook frowned. No. Yes, Jimin insisted, his voice sharper now. If something's wrong. I'm not letting you handle it alone. Their eyes locked. Tension. Stubbornness. Fear. Then, the voice outside dropped, losing its patience. If you don't open this door right now, things are going to get worse for both of you. Jungkook's expression darkened instantly. That's not how he talks. Jimin nodded slowly. That was all the confirmation they needed. Jungkook moved first, silently stepping away from the door, scanning the apartment quickly. We need another exit. There's a back stairwell, Jimin said, already moving, through the kitchen. Another knock. Louder. More aggressive. The handle rattled. Jimin's pulse spiked. They're trying to force it. Jungkook grabbed his arm again, pulling him toward the kitchen. Move. They slipped through the apartment, footsteps quick but controlled, the tension climbing with every second. Behind them, a loud bang. The door. Jimin flinched. They're breaking in. Jungkook didn't slow down. Don't look back. Another bang. Wood cracking. The sound echoed through the apartment like a warning shot. They reached the kitchen, Jungkook pushing the back door open carefully, checking the narrow stairwell beyond. Empty. For now, he muttered. Jimin stepped through first this time, adrenaline overriding everything else. Another crash from inside the apartment. The front door giving way. Jungkook slammed the back door shut behind them, grabbing Jimin's wrist again as they started down the stairs. Fast. Breathless. The air smelled damp, concrete walls closing in around them. Who the hell are they? Jimin whispered. I don't know, Jungkook replied, but they knew exactly where we were going. Jimin's chest tightened. That means... We're being tracked, Jungkook finished. They reached the bottom of the stairwell, pushing the exit door open into a dim alley. Cold air hit them again. Jungkook scanned left, then right. Empty. But it didn't feel safe. Which way? He asked. Jimin hesitated. That was enough for doubt to creep in. Jungkook looked at him sharply. Jimin. I don't know, Jimin admitted, frustration lacing his voice. I didn't think we'd have to run from my own place. Another sound echoed faintly from inside the building. They were coming. Jungkook made the decision instantly. We don't stay still. He pulled Jimin with him, moving quickly down the alley, footsteps echoing too loudly in the narrow space. Jimin tried to steady his breathing. This is insane. Jungkook let out a short, humorless laugh. You confessed on live television, of course it is. Jimin shot him a look despite everything. Now is not the time. Jungkook glanced at him briefly, something almost like a smirk flickering through the tension. Just making sure you're aware. A sudden noise behind them. The stairwell door slamming open. Jimin's heart dropped. They're here. Run, Jungkook said. This time neither of them held back. They ran. Footsteps pounding. Breaths burning. The city blurred again, but this time it wasn't behind glass. It was raw, chaotic, unpredictable. Jimin stumbled slightly, Jungkook catching him without breaking stride. Focus. I am, Jimin shot back, breathless. A voice shouted behind them. Stop. They didn't. A turn. Another alley. Then. Jungkook grabbed Jimin suddenly, pulling him into a narrow gap between two buildings. Wait, Jimin started. Quiet, Jungkook whispered sharply. They pressed back into the shadows, both trying to control their breathing. Footsteps rushed past the alley entrance. 1, 2, 3 people. Jimin held his breath. The footsteps slowed. Stopped. For a second, everything felt like it might collapse. Then, the footsteps moved on. Fading. Jimin exhaled slowly, his whole body shaking now that they'd stopped. Jungkook didn't move right away. He stayed still, listening, making sure. Only when the silence settled again did he relax slightly. We can't stay here long, he murmured. Jimin nodded, still trying to steady himself. Jungkook. Yes. Jimin hesitated, then spoke anyway. This isn't just about us anymore, is it? Jungkook looked at him, eyes sharp even in the dim light. It never was. Jimin swallowed. You think they're going to keep coming? Jungkook didn't sugarcoat it. Yes. The word hung heavy between them. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear mixing together. We need help. Jungkook's gaze darkened slightly. From who? Jimin didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, he didn't know who they could trust anymore. Jungkook watched him for a moment, then sighed quietly. We figure it out together. Jimin met his eyes. Despite everything, the chaos, the danger, the uncertainty, there was something steady there. Something real. Together, Jimin echoed softly. Another distant sound echoed through the streets. A reminder. They weren't safe yet. Jungkook stepped back slightly, scanning the alley again. We move now. Jimin nodded. And this time, when they stepped out of the shadows, it wasn't hesitation that followed them. It was the quiet, undeniable realization that whatever had started on that stage had just turned into something far more dangerous than either of them had ever imagined. The rain started without warning. 1 second the air was dry and sharp in their lungs, the next it was pouring hard enough to blur the streetlights into smeared gold and white. Jungkook didn't slow down. Keep moving, he said, voice low but firm, his hand still wrapped tightly around Jimin's wrist as they pushed through the empty street. Jimin was breathing harder now, his chest tight, not just from running but from everything crashing down at once. We can't just keep running blindly. We're not, Jungkook shot back. We're staying unpredictable. That's not a plan, Jimin snapped, his voice rising despite himself. Jungkook stopped so suddenly that Jimin almost collided into him. It's better than standing still and getting caught, Jungkook said, turning sharply to face him. Rain soaked through their clothes, clinging to their skin, dripping from their hair, but neither of them seemed to notice anymore. Jimin's eyes burned. You think I don't get that? I'm just saying we need direction. And I'm saying we don't have the luxury of perfect plans right now, Jungkook fired back. The tension between them snapped tight again, raw and unfiltered. Jimin stepped closer, frustration bleeding into something deeper. You don't have to act like you're the only one thinking. And you don't have to act like you're the only one who's scared, Jungkook replied instantly. That hit hard. Jimin's expression faltered for a second, something vulnerable flickering through before he masked it again. I'm not acting. Neither am I, Jungkook said, quieter now but no less intense. The rain filled the silence between them. For a moment, it felt like everything might break again. Then, a car passed at the end of the street. Too slow. Jungkook's head snapped toward it immediately. Jimin followed his gaze, his stomach dropping. Don't tell me. They're looking, Jungkook muttered. The car slowed even more. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's arm this time. We need cover. Jungkook scanned quickly, eyes locking onto a flickering neon sign down the block. A small, nearly empty building. Over there, he said. They moved fast again, not running outright but quick enough to blend urgency with caution. The bell above the door chimed as they stepped inside. Warm air hit them, thick with the scent of coffee and something faintly burnt. The place was almost empty. One worker behind the counter. No one else. Jungkook didn't relax. Not even a little. Act normal, he murmured. Jimin let out a quiet, humorless breath. Define normal. Jungkook shot him a brief look, less like we're being hunted. Jimin almost laughed. Almost. They moved further inside, taking a seat near the back where the lighting was dimmer. Jimin ran a hand through his wet hair, his fingers trembling slightly now that they'd stopped moving. Jungkook noticed. You okay? He asked, softer this time. Jimin nodded automatically, then shook his head a second later. No, but I will be. Jungkook leaned back slightly, eyes still scanning the windows. Good. The worker approached cautiously. Do you want anything? Jimin blinked, the normalcy of the question almost surreal. Coffee, too. The worker nodded and retreated quickly. Silence settled again, but it wasn't as sharp as before. Jimin leaned forward, lowering his voice. We can't keep doing this. I know. No, I mean it, Jimin pressed. Running, guessing, reacting, it's not enough. Jungkook finally looked at him fully. So what do you suggest? Jimin hesitated. Then, we stop letting them control the situation. Jungkook's eyes narrowed slightly, meaning. Jimin leaned closer. We find out who they are. Jungkook studied him, something shifting behind his gaze. That's not exactly easy. No, Jimin admitted, but it's better than waiting for the next attack. Jungkook exhaled slowly, considering it. You're thinking about that number. Jimin nodded. It's our only lead. The coffees were placed on the table, steam rising between them like a fragile barrier. Neither of them touched the cups. Jungkook tapped his fingers lightly against the table, thinking, if we call it, we risk exposing ourselves. If we don't, we stay blind, Jimin countered. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Jimin leaned in closer, his voice dropping even further. We're already exposed, Jungkook. They found my place. They intercepted our car. What else are we waiting for? Jungkook didn't respond immediately. Because Jimin wasn't wrong. That was the problem. Finally, Jungkook reached out, picking up the phone Jimin had placed on the table earlier. The unknown number still sat there. Unanswered. Unexplained. Dangerous. Jungkook looked at Jimin one last time. If this goes wrong. It already has, Jimin interrupted quietly. Their eyes locked. No more hesitation. Jungkook hit call. The ringing felt louder than it should. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then it clicked. Silence. No greeting. No sound. Jungkook's grip tightened slightly on the phone. Who is this? Nothing. Jimin leaned closer, his heart pounding. Say something. Then, a voice. Distorted. Calm. You took longer than expected. Jimin's blood ran cold. Jungkook's expression hardened instantly. You've been watching us. A faint chuckle came through the line, observing there's a difference. Who are you? Jungkook demanded. Another pause. Then, someone who knows what happens next. Jimin couldn't stay silent anymore. Then say it. The voice shifted slightly, almost amused. You really want the truth? Yes, Jimin snapped. Silence. Then, the truth is, this doesn't end with just the two of you. Jungkook's eyes darkened. What does that mean? It means, the voice continued, slow and deliberate, you were never the target. Jimin felt his stomach drop. Jungkook leaned forward, his voice turning dangerously low. Then who is? The answer came without hesitation. Everyone around you. The line went dead. Jungkook stared at the phone. Jimin's hands were shaking again. The air in the cafe suddenly felt too thick, too suffocating. Jimin whispered, barely audible, what did we just get dragged into? Jungkook didn't answer. Because for the first time since all of this started, he didn't have one, the coffee had gone cold. Neither of them had touched it. Jungkook was still staring at the phone like it might ring again, like the voice on the other end might suddenly decide to explain itself, undo the damage it had just done with a single sentence. It didn't. Jimin exhaled slowly, pressing his palms flat against the table as if grounding himself. Everyone around us, he repeated under his breath, the words tasting wrong, heavy, dangerous. Jungkook finally looked up. That wasn't a threat. Jimin frowned. What? That was a warning, Jungkook said, voice tight. Jimin shook his head immediately. No, that didn't sound like someone trying to help us. It didn't sound like someone bluffing either, Jungkook countered. Silence stretched between them again, thick with conflicting instincts. Jimin leaned back, dragging a hand down his face. So what, we trust the mysterious stalker now? I didn't say that, Jungkook replied sharply. I'm saying we don't ignore it. Jimin let out a frustrated breath, his voice rising despite the quiet cafe. We can't protect everyone around us, Jungkook. That's not realistic. A glance from the worker behind the counter made him lower his tone again, but the tension didn't fade. Jungkook leaned forward, eyes intense. It doesn't have to be everyone, it just has to be the right person. Jimin froze slightly. The implication landed instantly. You think they're targeting someone specific, Jimin said slowly. Jungkook nodded once, and using us as the way in. Jimin's chest tightened. Who? Jungkook didn't answer. Because they both already knew the possibilities. Managers, members, staff, anyone close enough. Jimin swallowed hard. If that's true. Jungkook's voice dropped. Then staying away might not protect them. Jimin's fingers curled slightly on the table, and going back might lead them straight to whoever it is. Exactly. The trap closed in around them, invisible but suffocating. Jimin laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. Great, so either way we lose. Jungkook's gaze softened just a fraction. We don't lose if we move smarter. Jimin looked at him. You have something in mind. Jungkook hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We stop reacting, we bait them. Jimin's eyes widened. You're serious? They're watching us, Jungkook said, so we give them something to watch. Jimin leaned forward, voice sharp again. That's dangerous. So is everything else right now. That's not a justification, Jimin snapped. It's reality, Jungkook shot back. The tension flared again, hotter this time. Jimin stood abruptly, packing a few steps before turning back. You don't get to decide this alone. Jungkook stood too, matching his intensity. I'm not trying to. It sounds like you are, Jimin said, voice tight. Jungkook's jaw clenched. then stop pushing me like I'm your enemy." The words hit harder than expected. Jimin stilled. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Jimin's voice dropped, quieter but more raw. "I'm pushing because I don't want to lose you." Jungkook blinked. The anger didn't disappear, but it shifted. Jimin took a step closer, his voice unsteady now. "Do you understand what this looks like from my side? You're already halfway into something reckless, and he stopped himself, breath catching. "I just got you to stay." Jungkook's expression faltered slightly. "I'm not trying to control you," Jimin continued softer. "I'm trying to keep you here." The words lingered between them, heavier than anything else that had been said. Jungkook looked away for a moment, running a hand through his damp hair. "I'm not going anywhere." Jimin let out a quiet breath. "You say that now." Jungkook's gaze snapped back to him. "I mean it." Jimin held his eyes, searching for something, certainty maybe, or proof that didn't exist yet. Then he nodded faintly. "Okay," he said. The tension eased just slightly. Jungkook exhaled, his voice softer now. "We'll figure this out together." Jimin gave a small, tired smile. "You keep saying that like it's a plan." "It's the only one I trust," Jungkook replied. That almost made Jimin laugh again. Almost. Then, the bell above the cafe door chimed. Both of them turned instantly. A man stepped inside. Nothing unusual at first glance. But Jungkook's body tensed immediately. Jimin noticed. "What?" Jungkook didn't look away from the man. "He's been outside." Jimin's pulse spiked. "You're sure?" "I saw him when we came in." The man glanced around casually, then walked up to the counter. "Too casual. Too controlled." Jimin's voice dropped. "We leave." Jungkook shook his head slightly. "Not yet." The man ordered something, his voice low, back turned to them. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "He's not here for coffee." Jimin's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Then what is he here for?" Jungkook didn't answer. Because the answer was obvious. Them. The man turned slightly, just enough for his gaze to sweep across the room. It landed on them. Paused. Jimin's breath hitched. Jungkook didn't move. Didn't look away. A silent standoff. Then, the man smiled. Not friendly. Not threatening. Something worse. Knowing. Jimin whispered, barely audible. "Jungkook." "I see it," Jungkook murmured back. The man picked up his drink. Then, instead of leaving, he started walking toward them. Each step slow. Deliberate. Jimin's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might give them away. "Say the word," Jungkook muttered under his breath. "We move." Jimin didn't respond immediately. Because something about this felt different. Not like the others. Not rushed. Not chaotic. Calculated. The man stopped at their table. Up close his expression was even more unsettling, calm, almost amused. "Rough night," he said lightly. Jungkook's voice was ice. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. Then he placed something on the table. A phone. Different from theirs. Jimin frowned. "What is that?" The man's eyes flicked between them. "Insurance." Jungkook didn't touch it. "Explain." The man leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You're asking the wrong questions." Jimin's patience snapped. "Then tell us the right ones." The man's smile widened just a fraction. "The right question," he said softly, "is why you're still alive." The air shifted. Jungkook's eyes darkened. "What does that mean?" The man straightened, picking up his drink again. "It means," he said, his tone suddenly colder, "someone is keeping you that way." Jimin felt a chill run down his spine. "Who?" The man met his gaze. For a second, something almost like pity flickered there. Then it was gone. "You'll find out," he said. And just like that, he turned and walked away. The bell chimed again as the door closed behind him. Silence swallowed the room. Jimin stared at the phone left on the table. Jungkook didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then slowly, Jimin reached out. Jungkook grabbed his wrist instantly. Don't. Jimin looked at him. We don't have a choice. Jungkook's grip tightened. We always have a choice. Jimin shook his head. Not anymore. Their eyes locked. The weight of everything pressed down again. Then, Jungkook let go. Jimin picked up the phone. The screen lit up immediately. One message. Already opens. Jimin's breath caught as he read it. Jungkook leaned closer. And for the first time since this all began, neither of them spoke. Because whatever was written there had just changed everything again. The message on the screen was only one line. No greeting, no explanation. Just coordinates and a time. Jimin's fingers trembled slightly as he turned the phone toward Jungkook. You see this? Jungkook's eyes scanned it once, then again, slower this time. His jaw tightened. Yeah. A long silence followed. Jimin swallowed. This is a trap. Jungkook didn't disagree. Probably. And we are still considering it, Jimin added, almost disbelieving. Jungkook finally leaned back, exhaling slowly as he dragged a hand down his face. We've been reacting all night. Running, hiding, guessing. This is the first time someone's actually giving us a direction. Jimin frowned. A direction straight into danger. Jungkook looked at him. We're already in danger. The truth settled heavily between them. Jimin glanced back down at the phone at the cold precision of the coordinates. What if this is exactly what they want, to isolate us, to control the next move? Jungkook's gaze softened slightly, but his voice stayed steady. Then we stop thinking like prey. Jimin looked up. And start thinking like what? Jungkook held his eyes. Like we're part of the game too. The words weren't reassuring. But they were grounding. Jimin let out a slow breath, his thoughts racing, fear and logic clashing inside him. If we go, we could be walking straight into something we can't get out of. Jungkook nodded once. If we don't, we stay blind, and whoever they're targeting next won't. That was it. That was the line that broke the stalemate. Jimin's shoulders dropped slightly, tension giving way to reluctant acceptance. You really believe this is the only way forward? I believe it's the only way that moves us forward, Jungkook corrected. Jimin let out a quiet, tired laugh. You always do that. Do what? Make the worst option sound like the only logical one. Jungkook's lips curved faintly just for a second. It usually is. Jimin shook his head, but there was no real resistance left in him now. You're impossible. And you're still here, Jungkook replied. That softened something. Jimin looked at him, really looked this time. Not just the tension, the fear, the determination, but the steadiness underneath it all. The part that hadn't run. The part that stayed. Yeah, Jimin said quietly, I am. Another silence followed, but this one felt different. Less suffocating. More certain. Jungkook stood first, grabbing the phone from the table and slipping it into his pocket. We don't have much time. Jimin nodded, standing as well. Then we don't waste it. They left the cafe without another word, the bell chiming softly behind them like a closing chapter. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, the city quieter now, almost as if it were holding its breath. Neither of them spoke as they walked. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. What mattered now was what they would do. The location wasn't far. An abandoned building at the edge of the city, half forgotten, half hidden behind years of neglect. It looked exactly like the kind of place people disappeared in. Jimin stopped a few steps away, staring up at it. Last chance to turn back. Jungkook didn't hesitate. We are not turning back. Jimin let out a slow breath, then nodded. Okay. They stepped inside together. The air was cold, stale, thick with dust and silence. Their footsteps echoed too loudly against the cracked floor. Jungkook's eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. Stay close. Jimin didn't argue. They moved deeper into the building, tension building with every step. Then, a light flickered on. Both of them froze. At the far end of the room, a figure stood waiting. Not rushing. Not hiding. Just there. Jimin's voice was barely above a whisper. That's them. Jungkook stepped slightly in front of him. Stay behind me. The figure tilted their head, almost amused. You came, the voice said. It wasn't distorted this time. It was clear. Familiar. Jimin's breath caught. Wait. The figure stepped forward into the light. And everything shifted. Recognition hit first. Then disbelief. Then something heavier. Hyung, Jimin's voice cracked. Jungkook went still beside him, shock cutting through his composure. No, that's not. But it was. Someone they trusted. Someone close. Someone who had been there all along. The silence stretched unbearably. Jimin's chest tightened. Why? The question hung in the air, raw and fragile. The man looked at them, his expression unreadable for a moment, then it softened just slightly. I was trying to protect you, he said. Jungkook's voice turned sharp. By doing this? By controlling what I could, the man replied calmly. You have no idea how deep this goes. Jimin shook his head, his emotions spilling over now. Then tell us. I couldn't, the man said quietly, not until you were ready to see it. Jungkook stepped forward, anger rising. You don't get to decide that for us. No, the man agreed softly, but I did. The honesty of it hit harder than any lie could have. Jimin's eyes burned. All of this, the car, the apartment, the calls, was to keep you moving, the man finished, to keep you from becoming easy targets. Jungkook laughed bitterly. You call this protection? I call it survival, the man said. Silence fell again. Heavy, unsteady. Jimin's voice trembled slightly. So what now? The man looked at them both, something serious settling into his expression. Now, he said, you decide if you trust me enough to hear the rest. Jungkook and Jimin exchanged a glance. A silent conversation. Fear, doubt, but also understanding. Because despite everything, one thing was clear. They weren't being pushed apart. They were being pulled deeper into something bigger than themselves. Jungkook exhaled slowly, then looked back at the man. Talk. Jimin nodded beside him. We're listening. The man studied them for a moment, then gave a small, almost relieved nod. And as he began to speak, finally, fully, without distortion or distance, the truth started to unfold. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But enough. Enough for them to understand the shape of it. The danger. The reason. The cost. By the time he finished, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Of everything they had just learned. Of everything they had just chosen. Jimin let out a slow breath, his shoulders heavy but steady. So this doesn't end tonight. The man shook his head. No. Jungkook glanced at Jimin, something resolute settling into his expression. Then we don't end here either. Jimin met his eyes. And for the first time since all of this began, there was no hesitation. No, Jimin said quietly, we don't. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The city exhaled. And inside that broken, forgotten building, 3 people stood at the edge of something uncertain, but no longer alone, no longer blind, and no longer running from the truth that had found them. Whatever came next, they would face it the only way that still made sense. Together.